And welcome to the 2022 version of the Traction Reaction Podcast. I'm Steve Zautke. Thanks for tuning in. With me once again, Tony DiZinno, our resident IndyCar road racing guy. How are you doing today, Tony?
I'm good, Z-Man. How are you? Happy New Year. I don't know if we're still
Likewise.
within the statute of limitations to still say that. Larry David likes to cut it off a little bit earlier, but for our first recording of the year, I think it's okay.
I think you're good through Daytona, right?
Yes.
The Daytona 500. Well, this weekend, it's one of my, well, there's two events that are really cool because they're the only thing going on, and the reasons why they've been so successful, I think, is because of that. It's the Chili Bowl that we saw last week with Tanner Thorson winning, and then this weekend we got the 60th annual already, the Rolex 24 at Daytona, which is happening January 29th and the 30th, and a little bit different for those that love to watch it on TV because there's no more NBC Sports.
Right. And the past life me looks at this change and think it's I never thought I'd see the day where NBCSN would go the way of all other networks that have met their untimely demise. But this one was in the works for a while, it kind of felt like. And that being said, it's really not that different. There's still a network component. The race starts and finishes both on NBC proper, which is great. I think it's 3 total hours. First hour and the last 2 hours, and then it'll go to USA for most of the rest of it. There's going to be some time where it's Peacock only, which is the streaming service, which is another new change. IMSA has been on what's called Track Pass the last couple of years for its flag to flag, but NBC has consolidated its streaming services, so everything's through Peacock now, which is it makes it a little simpler, as opposed to kind of the a la carte purchases or offerings which they had in the past.
Which I like. I've been doing Peacock now. This would be my second year because with last year with the IndyCar, and it was kind of neat with the qualifying and the practice sessions and that. But this now is my understanding. If you want, you can put it on Peacock and let it go for 24 hours. Is that correct?
I think so. They said it's Peacock flag to flag streaming, and that there are 2 or 3 segments during the race where it's on Peacock only.
Right.
So there's like a couple hours overlap. It's like your usual graveyard shift, the 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. Eastern, and I think there's an hour or two during not too long after the start. But yeah, if you just flip it on and go, that's might be the easiest way
And
forward.
if you're thinking to convert over the Peacock and that, this would be the weekend to do it because it's pretty neat. Because the Rolex is nice for on a couple of ways because it's one of those sports, maybe like golf and baseball, where you don't have to be pinned on to the set and pay close attention. You can get stuff done around the house. So if you need to get the laundry done, you got a couple projects you need to do, you can go ahead and do that, especially if there's a red flag, and just kind of keep an eye on, listen for it, and just kind of, and then check in when you want.
Yeah, there's that. One of the things I always like doing is pairing it with IMSA radio to make sure to have that, because it's
Hmm.
really 2 different ways of listening to the same broadcast. You've got the NBC shows, definitely more not casual necessarily, but it's a lot less detailed and specific than IMSA radio is, which kind of goes a little bit more in the weeds on the specificities of technical stuff, regulations, lineups. They will know the third driver in the 22nd place GTD car, whereas NBC probably won't. So but that's not a bad thing. That's two different presentation formats, and in a 24-hour race, you can really get the best of both, depending on what time frame you're watching.
Some changes too with in the world of IMSA with drivers changes which occur every year, and in no particular order. Let's start off with Action Express with Tristan Nunez moving over to Action Express with Pipo Durrani, which I think is quite a formidable duel.
I think so. It is interesting that Nunez is the guy that gets the call. He is a very young but experienced driver. He's been around, I think, 10 years more or less, between upward prototype running, a lot of Mazda stuff. He did did a really good job at Mazda, and it's kind of their program whittled down. Guys went in different places depending on where their contracts were. There's been this big jockeying for everybody looking ahead to 23 as kind of the factory programs are starting up again. Where's Porsche? Where's Cadillac, Acura, BMW, Audi, so on and so forth. And Cadillac, has been around for now 4 or 5 years, and this is a really new shot for Tristan in a really with a team that is championship caliber. It's not that Mazda wasn't, because they
Mm.
certainly became that way the last 2 3 years, but he never really has been in a lineup where he's expected to contend for wins on a weekly basis. So it's a great opportunity for him. I think it's only a 1 year deal, so big show me opportunity to kind of lock in his future beyond this year.
Yeah, and then the Mustang Sam team, Tristan Valtier returns. You got Loic Duval coming up board with Richard Westbrook, and then Ben Keating is the also coming aboard too, I believe.
Yeah, Westy was awesome at the Aurora qualifying race. He has not been in a top flight prototype in several years. I think going back to the old Daytona prototype days, because he was with the 4GT program for a while, and he's still on it. He almost made that pass attempt in the Roar, and it was almost like he got a free shot at knowing how to battle weight if he's in the same position this week. So another interesting lineup. Really easy to forget that team won Sebring last year, won the 12 hour. So they're not inexperienced. They did a really good job. The JDC program did in the P3 race last weekend. Memo Gidley drove for them in that with a new guy. So John Church is one of those. I equated him with a friend to kind of like the Dale Coyne of IMSA, where he's like that dude that's been around for a while, really good customer program, and has a chance in a top flight deep field.
Yeah, and the Roar before the 24 this year was kind of neat because it was actually a qualifying race. So we'll get to that in a moment here. But I thought that was kind of a neat deal. It's a little bit closer together with the Roar and the 24 in the past, wasn't it?
Yeah, so I've been to the Roar. It's funny. This is the first year I'm not doing the Roar and Rolex, but for previous to that, I think I did 7 or 8 Roars in the last 10 Rolex. So there used to be about a 2 or 3 week gap in between, and then last year, 21 was the first year where they packaged it back to back. I think it's easier from a logistical standpoint. You get
Mhm.
down there once, you just stay down there. You don't have to do 2 rounds of trips, 2 rounds of hotels. There's a preview opportunity on the Wednesday now in the one Daytona area. It was supposed to be last year. They're going to do that this year. It gives the fans something together, and it really gives teams a good baseline for what the conditions will be a week later. It's cold. The Daytona cold is
Yeah.
a very different kind of cold compared to Midwest cold, just because it's wet and it's biting, and you don't
Yes.
think that it's Florida. You don't expect it to be 30 some odd degrees.
And it's always been that way. You can kind of tell if you been doing this for a while, like we've been, or also looking back in the photos back in the '60s. You'll see the guys with the old trench coats on and whatnot, and some some it can be what 75 and beautiful, but it can also be down in the 40s, also, can it?
Yeah, oftentimes within 2 or 3 days, that'll be a shift. It's
Yeah.
like you can't really rely on weather forecasts because they'll change every 5 minutes. And if it doesn't rain, there's going to be moisture or mist or something. So the overnight at Daytona is the longest bit in racing, because it's like it goes dark 6 o'clock, 6:30, and it's dark till well over 12 hours later before kind of golden hour, happy hour in that 6 to 7 a.m. ballpark.
Yeah, the total opposite of the 24 Le Mans, which is usually on the shortest weekend of the year. Yeah, Daytona, there's a lot of darkness. Of course,
Mhm.
now with old timers, will say, "Oh, it's not as not as bad as it used to be with the track lit up as much as it is," which is true. But let's move forward. And this is a team I want to talk about because I think this is going to be a quite the formidable team. And that's the Chip Ganassi Racing, who is just loaded for bear with the '01 car this year. You're going to have Sebastian Bourdais and Rainer van der Zand, along with Dixon and Palou this year. Palou, of course, the defending IndyCar champion. And then in the '02, Earl Bamber, which I thought was a surprise. It'll be interesting to see how he does in the prototypes, along with Alex Lynn. And you can kind of tell us a bit about Alex Lynn, please. And of course, we know Kevin Magnuson and Marcus Ericsson, too. So uh, that's a stacked lineup, isn't it?
It is so funny that a lineup that has 3 Daytona rookies is that formidable, because Palou and Ericsson have never driven a DPI race at all, and Alex Lynn has only driven one, but he won it. He did a one-off with Wayne Taylor a few years ago, and he won at Sebring in the 12 hour with the Taylor brothers. That altered their lineup. It had Jeff Gordon and Max Angelelli for the Rolex. They won that, and then they won Sebring with Lynn in his first ever race. He's been a sports car driver. He's done some LMP2 work. He's done some Formula E work. I don't know if he's been in a GT. He may have been. I feel like he might have been with Aston Martin at some point. I know he's had some success. A very talented Englishman. Earl Bamber has been working with the Ganassi team. It's been probably middle of last year that conversation started, but didn't get announced a little bit later. That's a steal. I think people forget how good a prototype driver he is because he was with the Porsche program for a while. He won the Le Mans overall twice. That's a great lineup. The 01 car, I mean, what can you say when, Dixon and Polo are your extras? It's like you're just fishing with dynamite at that point. Bourdais is still on top of his game, and he's now in a chance where he's going to be winning, expected to win regularly. And Renger, I think, is probably one of the top 2 or 3 drivers in the class. He's somebody that has really galvanized that team around him. I think he did a good job of rising to the challenge when Magnussen was in his teammate last year. I mean, they should have probably won this race last year if they wouldn't have had the tire issues in the last, half hour or so. And that was unfortunate of them. But I think the cars look good. They're stacked. They have a really deep crew. It would be shocked if they're not in win contention in the last hour.
This is a team I kind of need. It's a team that came over from Europe a couple of years ago, and now it's Elton Julian's Dragon Speed team.
Elton Julian's gone to the bag of tricks for Daytona, where he's managed to pull 3 IndyCar drivers together with Pato O'Ward, Colton Herta, and Devlin DeFrancesco with Eric Lux as their 4th driver. The car is basically a highlighter on wheels. It's this just, if you think about the Menards IndyCar, it is a super bright, just fluorescent yellow and orange car. I think it may blind you if you're not careful. So both races between Daytona and Sebring, Dragon Speed has a really, really stout lineup. So it's a little different. They ran 2 cars last year, and they only have the 1 each event going forward, but definitely a win contender. And that team's won Daytona before.
And then for IndyCar drivers, of course, you mentioned a couple, and then you also have Jimmy Johnson with the Alley Cadillac, and then Meyer Shank with Elio Castro Neves and Simon Pagenaud, and then Kyle Kirkwood, I guess we can call an IndyCar driver, right, with Vassar Sullivan.
Yeah, there's a bunch. There's those 3 that you mentioned. There's, I think, a couple others in LMP2 that come to mind, either past within the last year or currently. There is.
Yeah, because you can still call. I mean, to me, Sebastian Bourdais is still an IndyCar driver, even though he doesn't have a full-time ride. He might show up at Indy. Who knows? I don't. That remains to be seen. But yeah, there's a few drivers you can say that are.
Yeah, Renus VK is in a P2 car. He's in a Dutch car. Kirkwood is now in a pro class, which is awesome for him. As far as NASCAR goes, Austin Cindric's in the field. That's a cool bit. There's, I think it's either 9 or 10 IndyCar drivers full time, and then the couple other NASCAR guys. But what I like about that is that there's not like one driver only that everyone's gravitated towards. There was a 3 or 4 year period where between whether it was Jeff Gordon or Alonso or Zanardi, it was like there was the one guy or person that just controlled all the narratives. Now there's not just one. There's a surplus, and it is in probably 60% of the cars in the field.
Yeah, Rossi, of course, is back.
Rossi, yep,
yeah,
of course.
And then there's a couple of drivers with IndyCar experience, like Stefan Wilson. There's a few, even if you want to go with Jan Halen back in Champ Car is running still. So I mean, it's a stacked field. Gabby Chavez is who I was thinking of. So and then you talk about, it confuses everybody with all the classes. So we have DPI, we have LMP2, LMP3. Now,
so there's 2 GT classes, but they're a little different this year. GTD Pro and GTD. So those 2, 35 total cars. That's up from, I think, 27 or 28 last year between GTLM and GTD. But even that was 6 in one class and 20 in the other. Now it's 13 and 22. So that's a significant leap. And it's one of the things that was from watching the qualifying race and from talking to people on site this weekend, picking out cars and kind of figuring out who's leading in GTD, because there's the two classes and the cars are very similar, or not very similar, they are similar. The
Mhm.
only thing that's different is their number plates, because they're running on the same performance balancing stuff. Figuring out who's in contention, and if there's like two from different classes, it might be first or second overall, or that's going to be an interesting thing. The other thing I'm wondering about is, because they're on the same pace, GTLM was about 3 or 4 seconds quicker generally last year. They had different tires. Now everyone's on the same customer tire. What would happen if there's passing integration? We're trying to get by guys. It's going to be a lot harder. So I'm wondering if we're going to see some more dive bombs, see a lot of cautions. I think you're going to see a lot of angry, aggressive driving as the race goes on.
You saw that in Aurora going into turn one with the two prototypes there. So yeah,
Mhm.
it's back in the day, we always, you'd have a 3-car team and one would be a rabbit. I mean, the one I remember that really sticks out was when Ari Leindeck, I think, was in that Nissan in about 1990, and he is cutting through that field going, like a bat out of hell. It is impressive to watch, but that was the deal. I mean, it's, you go back to Le Mans '67, Foyt and Gurney were the rabbit. They weren't supposed to last. They were supposed to blow up, but draw the other cars out to chase them. Now, they're the reliability is so good that you don't have to do that. You're charging from the word go.
Oh, no question. I mean, it's not even a reliability race necessarily anymore. There's 61 cars starting, right? If there aren't any issues in practice or qualifying, you could there could be close to 50 that finish. I mean, I think majority of retirements are going to be incidents or just unrepairable stuff. I think last year there were still high 30s running at the finish. So add another, 20, 13, 20, sorry, 13 or 15 cars to the field. Figure half of them finish, that's 45. So not only are you going to have more cars, but you're going to have way more longer than there have been. So I'm going to be very interested to see what the reliability issue is, because I don't think there's going to be too many issues. The only two cars I think that are concerns are really the new ones within GTD at Corvette, that with their modified car, and then BMW with their new M4.
Yeah, it was interesting. There's an interesting article on NBC Sports where they're talking about why the reason why there was fewer NASCAR drivers racing in the Rolex now is because of the issues. I shouldn't say issues, maybe the teething issues they're having with the next gen car in NASCAR in the Cup Series. So it's interesting. There's so many drivers that are concentrating on that, doing the development work and working out the bugs, that I can understand where some of the Cup teams are saying, well, let's concentrate. Let's make sure we're good for the 500. Maybe we'll do the Rolex next year.
Yeah, and I actually read that. I think that was a pretty interesting take. It was smart. What was cool about it was it kind of explained why something that would have made sense, given that the new Cup car, the next gen car, is very GT3 inspired, why there aren't takers. I think there's the other thing of guys want to get through their first year run through this NASCAR car first. So maybe then when they come back in 23, and I think there's going to be even more interest in 23 because of the new products. Even, Daytona's done a great job with this year being the 60th. They have a really stacked Grand Marshals. They have like 6, I think, from different eras. Uh, but you want to see stuff when it's really high level, and I think everyone's been kind of building toward 23. So this year's a bit of a transition year, and if there's not a huge NASCAR number, that's not the end of the world by any stretch.
The question I had for you with Corvette Racing, a new driver this year, was Nicky Katzberg, Dutch driver. And I've always been kind of curious, with Corvette with their drivers. I understand, there's always been, when you go to Le Mans, you want to make sure you have a French driver on the team, that kind of stuff. But why Nicky Katzberg?
Katzberg is a very experienced GT3 driver. He, I think, did 2 or 3 races with Corvette last year. I'd have to go back and double check, but he's super fast, offers really good technical feedback, and he's very versatile. For GT3, which Corvette doesn't have a ton of experience in, really any. He's got a lot of it in 2 or 3 different other manufacturers over the course of his career. So that experience and kind of the bonding member with the team is really good. They have another new driver in their second car, the 4 car, Danish driver Marco Sorensen, who's been with Aston Martin for a long time.
And then one more team I wanted to touch base on, and that of course is the BMW Team Rll.
I guess we'll call it reboot, retool. Is they're working on a new shop in outside Indianapolis, I think in Brownsburg. They're kind of building toward the LMDH program, so I would expect that their BMW prototype comes online for testing later this year. In the meantime, they've got 2 of the new GT3 cars. They have a few new drivers in one of them. They've paired their 2 American regulars, Connor DeFilippe and John Edwards, in one car. So they kind of have a similar Ganassi track where they have one car of past Rolex winners and another car that's kind of more unknown to the US, but very talented in international racing. So it's actually almost identical in that framework.
So moving forward, like with Team Penske too, who's going to be will be starting their program, their new road racing program in Sebring in March.
Yeah, they are another one. I feel like transition's a bit of a buzzword. Penske's got, they have a sports car racing. It's not complicated. So they have a P2 class car they will run in the WEC this year. What that program is, it's similar to what they did when they came in with Acura a few years ago and ran a prototype. They ran a test race essentially with the base car. So now they're kind of doing the same thing where now they're running in WEC to get a sense of the regulations, what the pit stops are like, what it is running a 3-driver lineup. And to Penske's credit, because LMP2 requires essentially a gentleman driver, silver, they've managed to pull Emmanuel Collard, who's I'm sure multiple time sports car champion, Le Mans winner, drove with Penske back in the day. Well, he's of age now where he can qualify as silver, so you kind of sneakily get around that. So they've got Dane Cameron, Felipe Nasser already announced. It would not shock me to see many of the other Porsche factory guys that Nasser is racing with featuring in that down the road. And they are laying the groundwork. They've already won the competition to get their car first out publicly with testing in Germany. So the actual LMDH car, not their P2 kind of interim car.
Let's go to I don't want to say predictions because I just think it's going to be a Ganassi race. I think they've been just so strong, but let's hope for a good competition. But the prototype class is I mean, anybody can win that class.
Any one of the 7 could win, even the JDC car, which has Ben Keating in it. And that's the first ever bronze, or not first ever, but one of the first bronze gentleman drivers to get a chance to run for an overall win. We didn't even touch on Wayne Taylor Racing, which, oh, by the way, has won 4 of the last 5 and is going for 4 in a row with yet another different driver lineup. Will Stevens in the car this year with Rossi, Ricky Taylor, and Philippe Albuquerque. So it feels to me like Ganassi versus Wayne Taylor at the end of it, and I think Ganassi will come out on top.
And then any other teams that kind of stick out that you kind of have an interest in, or drivers have particularly, like, of course, for us, of course, we're big Aaron Telitz fans, friend of the show. But in anyone else?
So hard to pick. I mean, there's I think that's the hardest thing. I mean, I'll be interested to see how those IndyCar drivers do carrying the P2 lineups. That's always a hard one to pick because they're identical cars. LMP3, Andretti Autosport as a car in that they won their qualifying race last week. That's somewhat under the radar, but interesting car to watch. GTD Pro, I think, is fascinating. I think Porsche has the early edge there. I think it's a Porsche versus Mercedes battle. That Nasser, Campbell, Jaminet, Pfaff, Plaid, Porsche, that thing is sinister. I mean, in terms of look, lineup, and if they don't make any mistakes, I think they're in with a very good shot. And then GTD, there's 22 cars and probably 15 of them have a good shot. I mean, the teams actually that really has impressed me that's been kind of under the radar is a McLaren team called Crucial Motorsports. They finished second in the qualifying race. They have 3 what I like to call working actors in a sense: Paul Holton, John Miller, Patrick Gallagher. These are names that, again, they're not household, but if you follow
Patrick Gallagher,
yeah,
he's the one that came up through the MX5 series, right?
Yep. So he had the Ohio State
yeah,
vanity helmet a few years ago, and those are, I love lineups like that that are plucky. They don't even have a transporter. They have just an 18 wheeler, like a small, tiny little thing to
Really?
transport their car. They qualified second, and I don't think they're going to win, but they've impressed the heck out of me with just how small budget. It's a guy that, was racing Honda Fits, in World Challenge 7 or 8 years ago. Paul Holton's only in his early 20s now. And to see him in a program manager driver thing and have a GTD car that's competitive against, the Turners and the Fafs and the at Harder Racings and the Vassar Sullivan Lexus. And, now all the pro guys that are coming in, the BMWs, Corvettes, Ferraris, Lambos, etc. It's been really impressive to watch.
All right, we'll keep an eye out for them. So, well, Tony, we certainly appreciate you taking time out. Looking forward to it should be a great race. Make sure you check it out on Peacock and NBC, the big channel, the network
And
channel, and also USA.
yep, NBC, Peacock, USA, IMSA Radio. And always have a timing and scoring banner up, because that's going to be helpful to figuring out who's running where, because that's really hard to keep track of.
Well, it makes sense because a series that's so involved with technology, of course, on the social end too, very much so. And I mean, you can have all sorts of screens up while you're watching the race to know exactly who is where, who's where, and who's running, who's in and out. So looking forward to it. All was a fun. For us being, well, you won't be, but for us stuck in Wisconsin this coming weekend, it's always a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's funny. I'll be seeing my dad in Arizona and getting the chance to watch with him. Hopefully, we'll get out to the Barrett Jackson or one of the other car shows in Phoenix this weekend. All that being said, I haven't had the chance to actually enjoy the Rolex just watching it since 2011. The first one I went to was 2012, which was the 50th anniversary, and this year's it's the 61 cars, and again, there's 50 where I could see them in podium contention by the end of it.
Very good, Tony. Appreciate it, and make sure to follow Tony on Twitter. How can we follow you on Twitter?
Yeah, I think just my handle is the easiest at Tony DiZinno. I haven't finalized what scope of racing plans yet this year. Couple irons in the fire for some part-time events. I expect I'll probably be at my usual stomping grounds. So
very good. Looking forward to it, and take care. And thanks for watching the Traction Reaction podcast. We'll be back soon.